The Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins was wank. Thanks for watching. The Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins, most notably the Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins seen in Assassin's Creed Rogue and Assassin's Creed 3, were terrible assassins. And this is coming from a narrative perspective, so opinions really don't factor into it. In this video, I'm going to be going over why I don't think the Colonial Assassins were really great assassins at all. So, before we begin, I want to run my intro because I sacrificed putting it at the beginning just so I can make that shitty joke. So, hey everybody, welcome to another video, and in this one we are going to be talking about why the Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins seen in Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed Rogue most notably were terrible. And I don't mean as characters or as a narrative device or anything like that. My opinions on that are for another video. I'm talking specifically about the canonical fact that the assassins that we see in the Colonial games are very poor at upholding the assassins' beliefs. And yes, I am aware that James or Lasers did make a very similar video, but I promise I won't be leeching off of that video at all. Like, I'm not even copying him. I gave him the idea to make that video in the first place. Now I'm just doing it as well. Now that well over 90 seconds of intro, God help me, is out of the way, let's get into the video. Now, I can provide examples of the Colonial Assassins violating not one or two, but all three of the core assassin tenets. So why don't we stop messing around and get into the first tenet, which is stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent. You know what, I actually don't have any example of the assassins killing innocents at all. There's literally nothing that the Colonial Assassins do that kills any innocent civilians. Do you get it? Because the gameplay in the background was literally contradicting what I was saying. Yep, more than a fair few civilians were killed in that earthquake. In fact, let's Google how many people died in this earthquake. According to Google, the body count lies somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 deaths in the historical event that this earthquake is based around. So Shay Cormac is potentially responsible for up to 100,000 deaths. I think he's going to need a bigger freezer. So not only did the assassins kill an innocent, they killed hundreds of thousands of innocents, potentially. So you're probably thinking that they went overkill on violating that tenet. Well, you'd be wrong. Let's have a look at the wording of the tenet. Stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent. Maybe the Colonial Assassins really do love their loopholes. Stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent. It's a shame we can't stab this innocent civilian, but it doesn't say anything about buildings. That'll teach you, capitalist swines! So either the Colonial Assassins take the Creed's tenets way too literally, or they just violated the first tenet. This isn't the only situation caused by an assassin in the Colonial Brotherhood that resulted in the inevitable deaths of civilians. For example, Kesegawase sacked Albany, Connor had part of New York shelled, an assassin caused an earthquake not too dissimilar from the one in Lisbon in Haiti. God, the list goes on. So the next tenet to cross off the list is hide in plain sight. God, the Colonial Brotherhood is so well hidden that I have no idea where to find them. Like, I haven't got the foggiest clue. They're just stealth masters. So yes, the assassins have gangs, and those gangs like to fly a flag which bears the assassin insignia. And fair enough, to the average passerby, that logo means absolutely nothing at all. But you've got to remember they share these streets with Templars, and now the Templars know exactly where to look. But I mean, so much for being hidden. The point is to hide in plain sight, to be one with the crowd, to be a blade in the crowd, not a flag in the sky that everybody can see and know where you are. The assassins have a known presence in Assassin's Creed Rogue. There's another example of an assassin announcing the assassin's presence, is Connor telling George Washington about the assassins and Templars. This is why you're supposed to be hidden in plain sight, you're supposed to be blending in, but instead you're announcing yourself, and all of a sudden the entire Brotherhood is at risk. This is brilliant. So far we've confirmed that the Assassins have violated the first 2 tenets of the Creed and probably don't have a GCSE between any of them. Now, what about the 3rd tenet? Never compromise the Brotherhood. Well, violating the first 2 tenets kind of in turn violates the 3rd. So we already have a valid example of the Colonial Brotherhood violating the 3rd tenet as well. So by breaking 1 tenet, you're actually breaking 2, because the tenets are what upholds the Brotherhood. It's the Brotherhood's values. If you violate 1 tenet, you're going to compromise the Brotherhood's values, and as a result, you're violating that tenet as well. So we actually do have a handful of examples that are just a given. But there's always an exclusive example, so why don't we take a look at one? The really obvious example for this exclusively would be when Shay was frantically trying to explain that these precursor sites were connected to the earthquakes that were caused when they were interacted with. To which the Assassins didn't listen, kicked Shay out of the house. Shay broke in, stole the manuscript to avoid any further earthquakes, and then got shot in the back and fell off a cliff. At which point the Assassins definitely knew for sure that the precursor sites were linked to the earthquakes that were caused where they were, but yet they decided to try to kill Shay, take the book, and continue in their search for the next site. Which, if they'd continued, would have eventually led to the deaths of more civilians, and thus they would have violated that tenet again, and again compromised the Brotherhood in a loop. These colonial assassins are absolutely mental. They see the tenets and they think, alright, well, the Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins lives by its own tenets, or shall I say tenet, which is try to be shit at your job. So now that the tenets are out of the way, we know that the Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins don't really value what the Brotherhood is at its core very much. Now we're on to bonus points. In the events of Assassin's Creed 3, it becomes more and more apparent as you go through the story that Connor is killing a lot of Templars purely because they are Templars, and to him they're the enemy. Whereas if you do a little bit of research into what these Templars were doing, some of them had actually been trying to do noble things, they had noble causes, they were trying to help the colonies, and so on and so forth. But Connor comes along, kills a couple of them, and then before you know it, the entire nation is at war. Which leads to a lot of unnecessary casualties, as you might imagine. Which means that had Connor not been so naive and hasty in his actions, the American Revolution could have potentially been avoided. This is just an example of one colossal screw up on the Colonial Assassin's part. And even when Hatham tried to convince Connor about the errors of his ways, trying to get him to understand where he'd gone wrong, where he'd screwed up, etc, etc, Connor wouldn't believe it, showing the Assassins' undying naivety and pride. Another example of a colonial assassin who's way too proud for his own pants is of course Kesagawase, who is so proud that he cannot even begin to understand why Shay defected to the Templars and only referred to Shay as a traitor, which doesn't help between the Assassin-Templar conflict. Another example of this would be Adewale, who is fairly similar. But everybody's least favourite assassin snob, Chevalier, probably does take the crown on this one. And this pride in being an assassin that loads of assassins seem to exhibit, especially colonial assassins, seems to make them not open to the idea that they might be wrong or misguided, or that they might make mistakes. But now the assassins are completely immune from any wrongdoing in any way whatsoever. I really need to stop pulling that sarcastic gag. It's kind of getting old now. I've used it like 4 times already. The hubris that the colonial assassin seems to have, like I said, seems to be the root cause for a lot of their missteps, which cause a lot of trouble for everybody. Moving on, another issue I've noticed, especially with the assassins we see in Assassin's Creed Rogue, not really Connor because this one doesn't apply to him in a way, it's just that the assassins in Rogue appear to be very villainy. Even when you're an assassin, they seem to have this terrorist vibe about them. They don't even seem morally consistent with what you'd expect an assassin to be. And considering some of the Colonial Brotherhood's actions in Rogue, I can only describe them as an extremist branch of assassins that, as a result of their extremist behaviour, did more harm than good. And it makes me incredibly glad that some big boy came along and slaughtered them all. And then by the time Connor gets about, in his later years, it seems as if he reforms the Colonial Brotherhood to be a little bit less extreme. I wouldn't say this would happen in the events of Assassin's Creed 3, because as we see in Assassin's Creed 3, it's just Connor and Achilles, more specifically just Connor, going about killing people. But afterwards, I can imagine Connor probably chilling out, being like, right, okay, we need to reform this brotherhood. But it's before that where they seem incredibly extremist in their efforts against the Templars, that it's almost like the assassins are the bad guys. Now, if you want an example of this extremist behaviour, well, the final assassin interception contract has you rescue a random civilian that the assassins have taken hostage. They'd taken a hostage to bait out Shay, and we don't know who this hostage is. They could be a civilian, they could be somebody else. As far as we're aware, they're nobody special, but for some reason the assassins have decided to put this person's life in peril just to get at Shay. That is extreme behaviour. So what we know is that the Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins essentially runs amok with the Creed's tenets, breaking every single one of them in several ways each. They're extremists, and they're also dangerously naive, and way too proud for their own good to boot. And this isn't opinion based, this is all from a canonical interpretation basis. This is just how it is, how it seems, and it does appear as if there is one example that you do not want to live by as an assassin, it's that set by the Colonial Brotherhood in the 18th century. In fact, I'd say the Colonial Templars are more like what you'd expect from assassins than the Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins were. And you know you've hit rock bottom when your sworn enemies represent your beliefs better than you do. But by this point, I'm pretty sure you get the picture. The Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins were pretty bad. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share, comment. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Do you think the Colonial Brotherhood was terrible? Do you think they were any good? Do you have any examples to prove this or what? And I'll see you all soon.